Welcome back to the Faith Infusion Online podcast.
Oh, it's great to be back.
You know, something I've been thinking about lately is this whole idea of achieving the impossible through faith.
Yeah.
It's something we all dream about, right?
Absolutely. Those dreams that just seem out of reach.
Exactly. And this YouTube video we're diving into today argues that faith could be the bridge, between where we are now and where we dream of being.
It's a really powerful concept, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
What really struck me was, how the video starts by acknowledging that even people without faith can achieve amazing things.
That's true.
But it makes this really important distinction. God calls us, those of us with faith, to do the impossible.
I see. So it's like there's this whole other level you can reach.
Yeah.
Just through faith.
And the video brings in this quote from A.W. Tozer to really highlight this. He said, God is looking for people he can do the impossible with.
Wow, that's powerful.
But then he goes on to say, what a pity that we plan only the things that we can do by ourselves. It's like we limit ourselves before we even begin.
It's so true, isn't it? We get so caught up in what we think is realistic. Okay, what can I do with my own skills and resources?
Right.
But what if we flip that around?
Yeah, what if we ask, what could God do through me if I just completely let go and surrendered to his plan?
Now you're talking. That's the core of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the video, it brings in another quote that speaks to this time from George Mueller.
Oh, I love George Mueller.
He was a man known for just incredible faith. He said, faith does not operate in the realm of the possible. There is no glory for God in that which is humanly possible. Faith begins where man's power ends.
So what he's saying is, if we can achieve it on our own, it's not really faith, is it? It's just human effort.
Exactly.
Faith steps in when we push beyond our comfort zones, when we go for something that seems totally impossible with just our own strength.
And to really drive that point home, the video shares this powerful quote from Amy Carmichael, the missionary.
Oh, yes.
She dedicated her whole life to rescuing children in India.
It's an incredible story.
She said, when you're facing the impossible, you can count on the God of the impossible.
These quotes, they're just so inspiring. But let's be real for a second. Sometimes it's hard to grasp this whole idea of the impossible. What does that even mean in our daily lives?
Right.
Are we talking about parting the Red Sea, walking on water, that kind of impossible?
Well, while those are definitely examples of the impossible, I think the video is focusing on a more personal level.
Okay, I see.
It's about those dreams and goals that we have that just seem completely out of reach. The situations where logic tells us there's just no way forward.
I get it. So it's not necessarily about literal miracles.
Mm-hmm.
But those times in life where we feel completely stuck, like we need some kind of divine intervention. Like we need God to step in and do something incredible because we can't do it on our own. What really stood out to you from the video about how we can tap into that power of the impossible?
Well, the video spends a lot of time on those biblical examples, those impossible feats that were accomplished through faith.
Yeah, those are always so powerful.
For example, it points to Jeremiah 32:27, where God says, behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me?
Right. Even way back in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
You see that core message. Nothing is too difficult for God.
Exactly. And then Jesus echoes this same sentiment in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Matthew 19:26 says that with God, all things are possible.
And then, of course, we can't forget that amazing story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with just 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Oh, yeah. That's a
Classic example of God's power to just multiply and provide way beyond what we could ever imagine.
And I love how the video focuses on Andrew's question in that story. He asks, but how far will they go? And it just perfectly shows how we tend to get caught up in the limitations instead of focusing on God's limitless power.
We get so lost in the logistics, the details, the how, the when, the where, that we forget God isn't bound by any of that.
It's so human, isn't it? To try and figure it all out, to have a plan.
It is.
But faith doesn't require us to understand how God will act, only to believe that he will.
That's such a good reminder. Sometimes we just need to let go, and trust that God's got it.
Completely. It's about surrendering to his plan, even when we don't get it.
I love that.
The video actually encourages us to dive deeper into this whole concept of faith with Bishop Larry Jackson's Faith Infusion books, volumes 1 and 2.
Oh, those are great.
They're 31-day devotionals, and they're designed to really help you increase your faith. and experience God's power in a really tangible way.
It's so true. And if you're listening and you're feeling inspired to grow your faith, to see God do amazing things in your life, you've got to check out Bishop Larry Jackson's work.
Definitely.
Go to bishoplarryjackson.com.
Great resource.
Okay, so back to this video. Another story they talk about is Peter walking on the water.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the one where Jesus sends the disciples ahead in the boat, and then he walks out to them on the water during a storm.
It's such a powerful illustration of what it means to step out in faith.
It is, even when it feels impossible and scary.
Yeah.
Remember how terrified the disciples were?
Oh, yeah. They thought they were seeing a ghost.
They did.
Yeah.
And then you've got Peter in this moment of incredible boldness.
Yeah.
He's like, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water.
Yeah.
He doesn't even think twice. He just asks.
Such an important point. So often we don't even bother asking because we're so focused on the how.
Right.
We miss out on those miracles.
Completely. We psych ourselves out before God even gets a chance to work.
Exactly.
And it's not even just about asking, right? Peter had to actually get out of the boat.
He had to take action.
He had to put his faith into action.
That's where the rubber meets the road. Faith without action, it's just incomplete. It's about taking that leap of faith, even when you have no clue where you'll land.
So thinking about your own life, where do you need to step out of the boat, so to speak? What dreams, what goals, what feels impossible right now? What would it look like to just take that first step and trust that God will meet you there?
That's the question, isn't it? Yeah, it's a challenge, for all of us, really let go of that need for control and step out in faith. But that's where the magic happens, That's where we actually experience God's power in a real way.
I know, right? It's so interesting, though, even Peter, in that moment when he's got this incredible faith, he takes his eyes off Jesus and starts sinking. The video uses this to illustrate the whole, the struggle with doubt and fear that we all face.
Yeah, it really highlights that doubt is just a natural part of faith. We all experience it, especially when things get tough, but it's all about how we respond to that doubt.
It's so true. Instead of getting discouraged and giving up, we need to refocus.
Yeah.
Peter cried out to Jesus when he started sinking. It's about recognizing that need for God and asking for his help.
Exactly. The video really emphasizes this idea that we need to shift our focus back to God and his power, not on the circumstances around us. Remember who God is and what he can do.
Right. It's so easy to get overwhelmed by the problems, the storms in our lives, and forget that God can calm those storms. The video reminds us that he's always there, ready to help when we call on him.
Absolutely. And it's in those moments of surrender, when we let go and rely on God, that's when we truly experience his power.
That brings us to another point from the video, this idea about relying on our own plan B, okay, God, I trust you, but just in case, I've got this backup plan.
Right. And that's where we limit God. The video talks about Peter wanting to stay close to the boat just in case he started to sink. It's that fear that makes us want a safety net.
Totally. But real faith is about letting go of that need to control everything, surrendering to God's plan, even when it feels risky, and saying, okay, God, I'm all in. I trust you completely, even if I don't get it.
It's scary for a lot of people, I think, to let go and trust God to lead.
Oh, for sure. It's a challenge. But the video reminds us that we're not alone in this. It talks about how God doesn't always show us the whole plan at once. He gives us just enough for that next step of faith.
It's like climbing a mountain. You don't need to see the whole path to the top, just the next step. You trust that the path will unfold as you go.
Yeah, and the video encourages us to embrace those moments of uncertainty, because that's often where God does his most incredible work.
It's about getting out of our comfort zones, letting go of what's familiar, and allowing God to take us places we never could have imagined on our own.
And sometimes that might mean leaving a job that feels secure, ending a relationship that's not working, or changing up a routine that's comfortable.
It can be unsettling, definitely, but also freeing when you realize God has something much bigger and better planned.
The video really stresses that we should never underestimate what God can do when we surrender to him.
It's about trading our limited plans for the adventure of following God's path, and who knows where that might lead.
Oh, that reminds me. They mentioned Bishop Larry Jackson's books again, Faith Infusion Volumes 1 and 2, as a great resource for building faith and learning to surrender to God's plan.
Yes. They're full of inspiring stories, practical advice, and powerful prayers. Perfect if you're feeling stuck or unsure of how to take that next step of faith. You can find out more at bishoplarryjackson.com.
Great resource. Okay, so we've been talking about surrendering to God's plan, stepping out in faith, and trusting that God will do the impossible. But the video also talks about those who might be feeling discouraged, like they'll never amount to anything.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. The video suggests that this feeling might come from never fully surrendering to God's plan for their lives.
So it's like we're trying to captain the ship ourselves, gripping the wheel so tight that we don't give God a chance to steer.
And by doing that, we limit ourselves to what we see and understand, instead of opening ourselves to the endless possibilities of God's plan.
The video challenges us with this powerful question. What could God do with me if I completely surrendered to him?
It makes you think, right? What dreams would we chase? What challenges would we face? What impact could we have on the world if we truly believe that nothing was impossible with God?
Really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, are we missing out by holding back, by not fully trusting in God's plan? What if those impossible things really are possible if we just believe?
And the video makes this point that it's never too late to surrender to God's plan. It's a choice we make every day. To trust his guidance. Step out in faith, even when it feels scary.
You know, if you're listening to this and feeling stuck, like you're not reaching your full potential, maybe it's time to ask yourself that question. What could God do with me if I surrender to him completely?
Yeah, what would your life look like if you really believed that nothing was impossible with God? What dreams would you chase? What would you try to achieve?
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? The possibilities are endless when we're working with God. He can do so much more than we can even imagine.
And the video acknowledges, some people might be thinking, this all sounds great, but how do I actually do it? How do I surrender when I don't even know what his plan is?
That's a good question.
It is.
And the video, it offers this advice.
Yeah.
Take it one step at a time.
Yeah, just focus on being obedient to what you feel God calling you to do right now, in this moment.
Right, so it might be something small, like encouraging someone who's down, volunteering for a cause you believe in, or finally tackling that task you've been putting off.
Or starting that project you've been dreaming of.
Exactly. It's all about being in tune with God's leading in your life. Those little nudges, those whispers in your heart.
Yeah.
When you feel God calling you to something, don't hesitate. Just step out in faith and trust that he'll be there every step of the way.
The video also talks about spending time in prayer and in God's word. That's how we get to know him, his character, his promises. And the more we understand God, the easier it is to trust him, even when we don't understand his plan.
That makes me think of another quote from the video. It said, God specializes in things that seem impossible. He knows 1,000 ways to make a way for you.
Such a good reminder that we don't need to have all the answers. God's got it. We just need to trust him and follow his lead.
And speaking of trusting God, they bring up Bishop Larry Jackson's Faith Infusion series again. Such a valuable resource if you want to build your faith and learn to walk in God's plan.
Faith Infusion Volumes 1 and 2. They're these 31-day devotionals, packed with advice, stories, and prayers, all to help you deepen your relationship with God. If you're feeling lost or unsure how to take that next step, I highly recommend them. You can find out more at bishoplarryjackson.com.
Awesome resource, especially if you're feeling like your faith journey needs a little boost.
We all need that sometimes.
As we wrap up this deep dive into faith and the impossible, I think the main takeaway for me is that God is bigger than any limitation we can think of. He's not bound by the laws of nature or human logic.
He's the God of miracles, the God of the impossible.
And when we team up with him, when we surrender to his plan and step out in faith, we open ourselves up to possibilities we never thought possible.
It's incredible.
So if you're ready to experience God's power, to see him do the impossible in your life, embrace this message. Let go of the doubts, the fears that need to control everything. Step out of the boat and walk on water.
Trust that God has a plan for you, a plan that's bigger and better than you could ever imagine on your own.
Thanks for listening.